Are we starting? Welcome. Let's just wait for MP Benjamin, and you can share the live, please. Share it. Let's get it populated. We are here with the Voice of Youth virtual budget consultation. So we'll be starting shortly. We have our young, dynamic parliamentarians here from the party. Look forward to the conversation. Thank you for joining us. And we're just waiting for MP Benjamin. All right. In the meanwhile, share the live. Share the live. All right, so let us start. Welcome, everybody. Welcome to the Voice of Youth. This is the UNC Youth Forum, and we are with the youngest parliamentarians in the Parliament of Trinidad and Tobago. They are represented by the UNC because we represent all generations, the widest cross-section of people in Trinidad and Tobago, and we are very proud and glad to have such a team of young, dynamic MPs with us. Let me introduce who we have here on the couch with us, and we will be joined later by two others. We have MP Saddam Hussein from Barataria, Samoa. He's also he's shadowing the Ministry of Legal Affairs and National Security. We have the MP for Tabaquite, Anita Haynes, and she is shadow for the Ministry of Education. We have MP for Princestown, Barry Padarat, and he is the shadow for the Ministry of Youth Affairs. And is that the wrong title there? You're looking at me funny.
It's Youth Development and National Service.
Youth Development and National Service. I apologize. I apologize for that. And we have Mr. Kavish Sirial, the chairman of the youth arm, to give, and that's in the party. So he's not in Parliament as yet, but certainly he is important in terms of the party structure. So we're going to be talking about the budget mainly, but you know, we often don't get a chance to meet the parliamentarians outside of the formal context of politics and the Parliament, where you have to be staid and stiff, etc. So I want to start off by asking a kind of personal question for the younger parliamentarians here, because for everybody, well, for MP Padarat, this is his second term, and I know MP Haynes, she was in the Senate before, but in the lower house is the first time for the other MPs. And from a general perspective, I'd like to ask you all. You all are young people in the Parliament. We don't. A lot of young people are turned off of politics. I'm sure a lot of your friends are, your family. People say it's a waste of time. People have a very negative view of politics and politicians. So what makes you different? What got you into this? It's admirable. It's important. I'd like to hear at least a tiny bit of your story. Let me start with you, Saddam.
Thank you very much, Kirk. Welcome everyone to this youth discussion on the budget. And with respect to the question that Kirk asked in terms of what really drove me into politics, is that ever since high school, I always had an interest for politics and activism. If you speak to any of my high school teachers now, they'll tell you that I always wanted to get involved in politics, and I used the avenue of law, becoming a lawyer, before getting into the Parliament, because the Parliament is where we make laws, and I think that it would have been beneficial, suitable and appropriate to venture into that career and then jumping into politics. I mean, very young into it. We went into the Senate, Anita, in 2017. Yeah, I was only 26, 27 years old then. thinking I should be somewhere out Lyman on a Friday evening or a Tuesday evening, but I'm in the parliament fighting with the president of the Senate and Senator Wademark having caucuses on a Sunday when you should be on the beach. So, I mean, it's all about helping people. And I hate to see oppression, and I hate to see when persons' rights are being taken away from them. And that is something that I will always fight for and stand for in the parliament and also in my career as a lawyer. That as a young man, I think I was given this opportunity by the Honorable Kamala Prasad Visesa, who has placed such a great emphasis on youth and allowing us that opportunity to showcase our talents in the parliament, because she truly believes that we are the ones who will be the future and make that difference in Trinidad and Tobago.
Yeah, that's a great story. I'm glad to hear that. And I forgot to also include you as part of the Senate last time. So sorry for that oversight, Saddam. Anita, how about your story?
Well, I, like Saddam, had an early interest in political conversations, political discourse. When I was finishing up A-levels, now I served as president of the Debate Society, UNESCO, all that sort of things in high school as well. So that interest was always there. When I completed year 2 of CAPE, I had a decision to make in terms of what I wanted to do, and I had gotten SAT scholarships in lower 6, so I decided that I would do that, use that and head to the States. At some point, I found out that I had gotten an additional scholarship, and so I had a decision whether or not to come back and do law, because most of us who are interested in politics usually find ourselves doing law. So I said, you know what, you're young, you have some time, right? Go ahead. And I did my degree. I have a double major in political science and history with a minor in economics. So I was kind of just figuring out where I wanted to take this interest that I had in the field. I wasn't sure. So in New York, that would have been between 2006 and 2010. Exciting time. You had a primary election with Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama. You then had the presidential elections and whatnot. So I took my interest into the back end of the political field, political communications, the data analysis, and how you get the vote out, that sort of thing. So I did a lot of that work during my college years, and when I was about to graduate, I decided that I would try some international work. So I went in with the UNDP and I did some work there. And then 2010 happened, and we had elected our first female prime minister, something that the US had not been able to do. And I said, you know what, I am a Trinidadian. This is a very exciting time for global politics, but in particular, it's an exciting time for local politics. So I called my dad and I said, I want to come back home. And well, my dad has always been very excited for me to return to Trinidad. Right. So he bought my ticket without any further questions, and I was back in Trinidad, and I started applying. And because of the returning scholar program and whatnot, I eventually got a placement in the office of the Prime Minister in 2011. And that got me into it opened a lot of opportunities for me. And one thing I would forever be grateful for is that Mrs. Prasad Visesa, as Prime Minister then, as she was, always ensured that doors remained open for persons who ordinarily would have found closed doors. You oftentimes believe that you need some sort of connection or to know somebody, and that did not happen with me. I don't think it happened with you either. And I did the work that was in front of me was a lot of back-end policy work, which is what I was trained to do. And doing the political communications, having done a lot of, again, back-end work on it, I was asked to be public relations officer, a role that I took too, and then we went into the Senate. And, you know, Dr. Rudan Munilal tells us all the time that politics is one of the few jobs that's left that apprenticeship is needed, that you learn it by doing it. And for both Saddam and I and Barry, and I'm sure most of us here, we've had to learn our skill set on live TV, on national TV, in the news, with the spotlight. and there is very little room for mistakes. But I think once you start with the passion, and the passion is not for the field, but is the understanding that you are accepting a position to serve people, then it becomes a lot easier. Then with, sharing our phone number, I know Sada, everybody has our phone number at this point, and we take the calls and we do the interviews. We leave late night meetings and we go early morning press briefings and morning shows and that sort of thing. And it is because we also have a very important role, which is to show persons that you can have an active life and you can still engage in thinking about national development, because without us, you are going to have persons making decisions that will bear out for us for the longest time. And if we aren't participating in those decisions, we're really going to end up wondering, how did we get here? And we want to be active participants. We also want to encourage persons to be active participants and to take up their agency and pay attention and get involved. So that's our role here as well.
It's a fascinating story. Thanks. That was really good. I didn't know a lot of that, and I'm sure a lot of our viewers didn't know. How about you, Mr. Padarat? What's your story?
Hi, good evening, everyone who's looking on. I wrote Common Entrance when Mrs. Prasad Bisesa was Minister of Education. And that vision of her delivering the SCA results at that time is forever imprinted in my mind. And my story is more of a personal story, in that I saw something at that time as a young child in Mrs. Prasad Bisesa, because the value she placed on education. And having known her as a child and growing up in the party to where I am today as MP for Princestown, one thing always stood out with her, and that was the value she places on education, in that she always tells us education is a passport out of poverty, and she always gives us her personal story of how she rose through the ranks of the party to where she is today. And having had the opportunity to work alongside her at the office of the Prime Minister and see firsthand the commitment that she has, Anita spoke about walking through doors that were not ordinarily available. That's a very, very true story. And I think a part of Mrs. Prasad Bisesa's story that not many people know is that she's like that for every single person that she meets. I often recall a story when we first established the Children's Life Fund, and I think that is what gave me the impetus to want to move from working behind the scenes to actually getting my feet wet in terms of representation, in terms of being a parliamentarian and helping people actively as a member of parliament. And that was when we established the Children's Life. And I remember sitting at the office of the Prime Minister at 10 o'clock one night, and the very first child that was sent from the Children's Life Fund was from the constituency of St. Anne's. And this was 10 o'clock in the night. Mrs. Prasad Bisesa got a letter, and she was reading. It was from the parents begging her to assist their child who required life-saving surgery. And I took the letter from her on her instruction, and she said, well, make sure you make contact with these parents. And I sat there, and after 5 minutes, she looked up and she said, what are you still doing here? And I said to her, I said, well, I'll work on this tomorrow. She looked at her watch. It was 10 o'clock. She said, I'm almost certain that those parents are still awake, because if it was your child, would you be asleep? And that struck me, and it stood with me ever since. And when we called those parents, they were beyond themselves. They were very emotional. But it tells the story of the impact that a leader like Mrs. Prasad Bisesa has had on us, the younger ones, and the reason why we feel so very in touch with wanting to be a part of the UNC and wanting to be a member of parliament and representing people. So for me, it has been a journey since then, but it's been a fulfilling and rewarding journey, both for personal growth, but also as a parliamentarian. So I'd really chalk it up to, yes, I like politics. Yes, I went into studying law and so on, but more so because of the emulation of wanting to be like someone like Mrs. Prasad Bisesa, who empowers people, especially through education and the opportunities that you can provide for them that ordinarily they would not have. So I totally agree with Anita and Sada on that point.
Very good. Well, thanks for that. Very insightful to your background. How about you, Kavish?
Well, I believe I was the first group of students who received laptops from the Honorable Kamala Prasad Bisesa while she was in government. And ever since then, growing up, I have had a passion for social development and community work. Throughout my community and my villages, when there were flooding, I would be out in the front organizing and assisting those in need. And through my 2 secondary schools, both Hillview College and Vishnu Boys Hindu College, I was able to take leadership roles in different groups, and that led me to build myself. And after which, I was given an opportunity by the Honorable Kamala Prasad Bisesa and the UNC, by extension, to become the UTAM chairman. Since I have become the UTAM chairman, I was able to create partnerships with many young people, and my social development skills now and the amount of work that the UTAM has been able to put in, it is marvelous. I was able to meet members in the UNC, young members like Saddam, Anita, MP Barry, and I felt welcome. I felt as though this is where my home is. Throughout my university years, I was, my friends would tell me, Kavish, but why UNC? Why UNC? And I told them, why not? UNC has policies. UNC knows how to develop the country. UNC has plans. And because of the things that I have learned so far in the United National Congress, I was able to recently receive a scholarship from the Model United Nations, and basically that entitles me to free accommodation in Abu Dhabi next month to build my leadership skills. And I am sure when I do that, I would take those resources and bring it back here to Trinidad and Tobago and to the United National Congress and help build and foster this country.
Wow, and congratulations on that appointment. Very good, excellent. And we look forward to you bringing your skills to the party. Let me introduce and invite MP Michelle Benjamin, and your shadow portfolio is tourism and culture. Yes, culture and the arts.
Okay, so that's good afternoon again to all our listeners and viewers on all the different social media platforms. My entrance into politics was somewhat me leaving the University of the West Indies and engaging with my former school supervisor, Mr. Clifton Dikoto. I grew up in a very close-knit community, and I'm always involved in church activities, and my mom would spearhead a lot of activities where we try to assist the poor, and I always had that embedded in me, and I wanted to emulate that. Having the opportunity to work and serve under Mr. Dikoto, our former MP from Murga Tablan, that further enable me a position of where I could have organized group activities, sporting activities, and also I was instrumental in some of the infrastructural development in the constituency while we were in power. And having seen what he was able to accomplish, and he would always say, Mish, you have a heart for this and you should go into local government, because I'm always the one pushing the envelope, always trying to get assistance. Even when someone will close the door and say no, I'm the one that will go knocking till that door opens. And I come from a community that really needs the assistance, and we have youths that are feeling depressed, and this has been so even when I was growing up, and I always wanted to bring that change and be that change.
Wow, that's excellent. And I mean, Clifton Dikoto was such an important member of the United National Congress, and sadly he's no longer here with us. But you are really carrying on his tradition, and the baton has been passed on to you. That's excellent as we move from generation to generation. This is the new generation of the United National Congress. Excellent. And finally, last but not least, the MP for Chaguanas East, Ms. Vandana Mohit. And your shadow ministry is social development, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, so why don't you tell us a little bit of your story about how you got involved? And I know you've been involved in a long time. You're actually you were my councillor and mayor, and now my MP. Yes, the youngest mayor of Chaguanas. So.
Yes, good evening to our viewers. Good evening to all of my colleagues here, who I'm very proud of to serve with, and many of whom sitting on this panel I've learned a lot from, especially the head of this panel this evening, MP Barry Padarat. And of course, Kirk, I've shared my story with you on numerous occasions as a councillor, as a mayor, and now as an MP. And what I would say is my shadow portfolio speaks a lot in terms of my journey. Because of some of the social issues I myself would have faced as a young person, as a child, as a teenager, and overcoming those challenges, it gives me great pleasure to shadow the portfolio of social services, social development and family services. And from my school days to now, I've always been involved. And you know, being involved in drama, abstinence, and all of these different clubs, and being a part of social work within the various communities, it has always shown me and it taught me lessons in terms of what I do on a daily basis. So all of these things would have contributed to my journey, and of course, what I've learned and what I've been through, it was really enhanced by Mrs. Bisessa, the manner in which she served, not just as a political leader, but the manner in which she served. Today I was thinking how she went about becoming political leader, prime minister, went back to opposition leader, but the manner in which she has served throughout in terms of social issues, it really, really touched the lives of many, and I've learned a lot from her. So assisting youth is really a huge part of me, and the issues in which youth face today really, really, really touches a part of my heart, whereas I need to serve and find the solutions to their problems. So for now, that's all I'll share with you until you go further.
Well, thanks very much. Thanks each and every one of you for sharing the stories with us, with the viewers. It's really important to understand, you know, where you come from, what your motivations are, and so forth. So here we are in a pandemic, in one of the worst times this country has ever faced, and we have a budget coming up, a dreaded budget. Let me just ask you all, and we could just have a free-flowing conversation rather than going one, and you all could jump in whenever you want. What do you think is needed now? I mean, we have so many issues with young people and jobs and education, and then perhaps with your portfolio, what are the challenges? What are you looking for? What do you expect? Let me just throw that open, and somebody could jump in whenever they would like.
Cook, you know, room full of politicians, and everybody here likes to talk, right? So, there are only a few mics, right? So we'll try to maintain some order, but I'm sure I'll just start off, and I'll do my very best to be brief, so because I'm sure we all have a lot to say. But for those of us coming in, Barry would be the best to give the comparison, but all of us are serving our first year as members of Parliament in a pandemic, with the majority of the months thus far being in a state of emergency. And we are elected as representatives in, again, an area of service. And so we are seeing directly the real life impact of the pandemic, and not just the pandemic, but of years of poor economic decision making. Because really and truly, it was not the past year and a half that got us to this point. We would have spent the majority of our first year being met with calls for devices in the first instance, because as soon as we were elected, schools were virtual school. I represent a rural community, Michelle, Barry. We were faced with issues of connectivity in terms of devices, connectivity in terms of internet. We would have then been met with parents, persons who are out of work. And in communities like ours, everybody takes care of each other. But if no one is working, the burden, it was a lot. And so from whether or not they would get salary relief grants, and these are people who are very proud, people who are accustomed working, earning a living, and now you are unable to do so because of months and months of lockdowns. And when we talk about, I mean, we would have heard the conversation back and forth about protecting lives and livelihoods, but in our cases, we have real faces, real people behind the livelihood story. And so as we go towards a budget, I know all of us will be going into discussion with real life stories. So there's more than a theory. You can come and tell us what you want about GDP and stabilizing and borrowing and your debt and whatnot. But we face real life stories. We have expanded our family to encompass now the thousands of people in our constituencies who we represent. And based on that now, we want to hear solutions and not excuses. We want you to not use the pandemic as a crutch and say, listen, well, sorry, earlier, COVID, things hard. Everywhere things hard. There's an opportunity to be innovative. We presented a national economic transformation plan, a plan that was designed with COVID in mind, because the election took place during the pandemic, so it wasn't a shock. You cannot be spending your first year governing pretending like, well, I didn't know. We didn't know COVID was going to be this. You knew. And so therefore you are coming now. We want a clinical evaluation in terms of what you've done with the money that you've spent already and what you intend to do. And what you intend to do cannot be an excuse, but it has to be an innovative way forward. And so I'll stop there and I'll pass along to my colleagues.
Good. Who wants to jump in next? All right, sit down. Barry.
Thanks, Kirk. I just want to pick up from where Anita left off with respect to the present day situation finding itself in a circumstance where government appears or gives the impression that COVID is the bastard child, in that, separate and apart from blaming Kamla Persad-Bissessar, when that fails them, they turn to COVID. And one of the mantras that we have stated time and time again is that COVID didn't crash our economy. It was the P&M. And I will say why we feel so very strongly about that. In 2014, revenues in this country started to fall because of the hydrocarbon industry. Hydrocarbon industry started to take a hit. Oil and gas prices started to fall. That was happening globally. But because of the policy of the Kamla Persad-Bissessar administration at that time, we were able to cushion the blow, because Mrs. Persad-Bissessar's government had the foresight. And recently I saw the chairman of NGC saying that we in Trinidad and Tobago do not need to diversify. We need to continue along the hydrocarbon sector. Had we taken that approach under Kamla Persad-Bissessar administration, we would not have the multiple facilities that we have built in healthcare. We would not have the multiple amount of facilities that we provided through the Ministry of Tertiary Education and Skills Training, not only providing tertiary education for the population in terms of formal tertiary education, but also in terms of skills training. We would not have had the multiple facilities that we have with respect to sport tourism that is currently being enjoyed in Trinidad and Tobago and regionally and internationally today. So because of that foresight that we had when we came into government to say, well, okay, we will look at the different sectors. Yes, and because of the Kamla Persad-Bissessar administration, I know Anita also shadows part of energy, and she can attest to this. When we were faced with a situation of coming into office where there were no deep water drilling, where there were no bid rounds for years upon years, under which the current Minister of Finance, Colum Imbert, sat in a Patrick Manning administration for years, where you had the current Prime Minister, Keith Rowley, having been fired only in 2008, but sat in a previous administration for years, having not a word to say when the hydrocarbon industry in this country collapsed prior to Kamla Persad-Bissessar coming into government in 2010. And it was because of the vision of the People's Partnership under Mrs. Pitsar-Bissessar that we saw deep water drilling taking place. We saw the same incentives that the Prime Minister complains bitterly about today. It is because of those incentives that were provided by the People's Partnership Administration to multinational companies that today they are seeing the fruits of that through several of the projects, be it Mitsubishi, Angeline, and there's a plethora of other projects that today we are able to cushion some of the effects of COVID because of those projects being instituted by Kamala Pitsar-Bissessar administration. So Kirk, you ask us, well, yes, we have COVID and what we would like to see happening to cushion those effects. My answer to that is that we had, and Anita spoke about the National Transformation Plan, that was revealed in the 2020 general election. But between 2010 to 2015, we didn't just speak about a plan, we instituted a plan. And 2016, 2017, 2018, we expected that there is a level of continuity in government, that they would have put forward plans and policies that even though a different administration was now in power, you would have continued projects that were already started. Just prior to this show, Saddam was telling me that it took them years, 3-4 years, before they completed a school that was 80% completed under the People's Partnership to complete only a few weeks ago. And they opened these things with grand fanfare to give people the impression that things are happening in this country when the average man, woman and child knows, because they feel it in their pocket, that absolutely nothing is taking place. And that's why we say it's not COVID that crashed the economy. COVID exacerbated and took us faster down the road than where the PNM was taking us. And where we are today is a direct result of poor administration, poor plans and policies. And coming forward in the next budget, what can we expect? Are we going to see the same old, where one member of government will tell us, well, we are not focusing on taxation, but in the next few weeks, we may see a new bill being introduced to the House where an additional tax is placed on the citizenry. So we want to see a level of transparency with this government in terms of telling the population directly, where are you taking us and how are you planning on taking us there in every sector. And I think this budget, I have had the benefit of being in the parliament for 6 budgets prior to this one, which will be my 7th. But it has been a budget that has been presented by the People's National Movement or the Minister of Finance. And the Minister of Finance in that 6 years has done nothing to instill confidence in terms of economic growth in our country. 1 year he tells us, I can see clearly now the rain is gone. Then he tells us, tighten our belt. So it's really the blind leading the blind. So I think this budget, many people are anticipating that it's going to be more and more hardship. But as Anita indicated earlier, we would like to see solutions, because we don't believe only in pointing out what the issues are and criticizing. We go there and we say, this is what you can do. This is what you can look at. Just recently, when they developed this Ministry of Digitalization, that was something Mrs. Pitsar-Bissessar told them to do in her very first speech as leader of the opposition when the PNM came in 2015. Had they digitalized these new hospitals that we were building through informatics and so on, that would have created thousands of new jobs. So these are some of the areas that we look forward in terms of fleshing out, in terms of what the UNC is advocating for. So I'm sure my other colleagues will indicate to you some of the specifics that we are looking for in with respect to their respective portfolios going forward.
Good.
So I would just like to jump in here now to say that Barry is right, Anita is right, that COVID didn't crash the economy. The PNM actually sickened the economy for 5 years, and COVID took us into the ICU now. And that is the reality of the situation, because you hear every single budget, we have no money, Yet yesterday we saw AV Drilling walking out with $100 million. And we hear that NGC has lost over $700 million in bad investment.
Mm-hmm.
And then you see all the craziness that is happening with the Police Service Commission. And then you wonder, is the government they want to set an example for the youth? And if the leader of the government, the Prime Minister and his ministers, are allowing persons to just do all of these things in terms of mismanagement, corruption, bad governance, and then there is no repercussion, then what does that give the ordinary young boy or girl on the road? That, listen, I could do whatever I want and get away with it, because if Mark Lukwan could do it, who is me? And this goes back to something called procurement.
Yeah.
Before we left government, the period 2010 to 2015, the Procurement Act was passed in 2014, proclaimed as Act number 1 of 2015, if I'm not mistaken. And we are now 6 years later, and that act is still partially proclaimed. And persons may want to know why I am talking about procurement. Because procurement is where there's leakage. So let's give a regular example. You have a pipeline, and you connect it to your house, and you realize, well, your water pressure is running low, and you wonder why. But when you see that there's a leak causing the water to run out of the pipe, you're not getting what you're actually paying for. And it's the same thing. Money is running through a pipeline in the government, through the consolidated fund, but because of corruption, there's leakage.
That's right.
So how is the citizens going to fully benefit from the revenues? So that when they pass budgets for 50, 60, 70 billion dollars, over this period of 6 years, they have spent over what, $400 billion?
Yep.
And where's the new school that they built? Where's the new hospital that they built? They boast about a swimming pool.
Yeah.
Imagine
a gas station, too.
a gas station, right? Imagine bus sheds. Imagine they can't, for example, implement pepper spray or fix the pothole in front of your house, but want to create the revenue authority.
Yeah.
And these are the persons that are asking us, well, let's have confidence in me. But my pothole can't get fixed and my drain can't get clean, but trust us with managing a pandemic. And this goes to public confidence and trust in our government. And the thing is, this budget, it's like a show. It's repeat now. Minister Burt will get up for 3 hours, stand up. I can see clearly now, we have turned around the economy. We have managed the pandemic well.
Yes. Lies.
Total lies. I can anticipate Minister Burt coming and beating his chest and saying all of these nice things. But then the salary relief grant is like a mythical creature, because you hear about it, but you never see it.
That's right.
Right? And these are some of the things that we have to raise, because these are the bread and butter issues, Kirk. So while we're here talking about policy, and we're talking about, and Barry would have laid out all of the achievements with the partnership with respect to energy, because that brings in the revenue. The ordinary man in the road don't want to know that, you know. They want to know when I go to the gas station how much I pay to fill up my tank. Or they want to know when they go to the grocery that food prices don't increase. And they want to know that when they are able to send their children to school, that they can afford a device for the child. Not that they want to hear about which hotel they want to build in Tobago or which TTRA they want to implement, because let me tell all you, property tax is coming.
Yeah. Right?
Persons can't buy food but pay us our tax. And just as a segue, if you're even squatting, you have to pay the property tax. If you have a chicken coop, or you have, for the other extra, if you have swimming pools, you have to pay property tax. And Kamala Persad-Bissessar, in the campaign last year, said if you elect these people back into government, they will charge you property tax. So said, so done. Yeah. So I'll allow my other colleagues, and then we can further the discussion.
Yeah. You know, MP Benjamin, there's an iconic photo, I would say, of you sitting like on the edge of a huge collapse of a landslide. I mean, you have so many problems in your constituency of those types of things. I mean, what are the types of issues you would be looking
right
for?
So coming from a rural constituency, as you would have pointed out, there are a lot of infrastructural issues. They would have had an allocation in 2017, I believe, of $178 million. But like my colleague would have raised, procurement is an issue in the sense, and I feel I could speak freely here, you see contracts being awarded to friends and family, and hence the work is substandard. Even before the wall is completed, there are issues. So what we have going on the Muruga Road is a repeat of projects. I have 3 completed retaining walls that have been retendered. So it's a waste of taxpayers' money. And apart from that, I would say about 75% of my roadway is affected by landslips. Yet we have to pay property tax. As my colleague rightfully said, what persons are looking forward to is how this budget is going to affect them. Now, this budget is going to affect us when we hit the grocery. I do not feel that this PNM administration understands what it is to stand by a cash register and hear tick, 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 and you're wondering, do my debit card have sufficient funds? Is the social welfare check is enough? Because every time you visit the grocery, things are increasing. Not long ago was by 50 cents. Today is by $10. And this is the reality that we have to face. Now, I would like to tell the youth population, like you, I know what it is to graduate from university and have to depend on OJT and had to wait. Like you, I know what it is to have that OJT contract end and go back to the dilemma of unemployment. Like you, I know what it is to be employed in a short-term contract, and this government fails to realize that when you're on short-term, you cannot access loans, you cannot enter into a mortgage, you cannot purchase a car, and these are the things that are affecting the constituents. As my colleague said, we see faces, we see emotions, and we have to deal with that. They would have barred off themselves from the community, from the country. So I think they don't live, nobody lives here. I think that's this, nobody lives here. And I am starting to feel, or with all their statements, they are saying there are no employment opportunities for the youths. And this is the reflection of how the youth population in Murga Tableland feels. It is depressing.
Kavish, I know you have a special interest in things like GATE and the problem facing students and so forth, particularly with the UNC Youth Arm. What are your observations there?
Well, I mean, lack of job opportunity is really a major problem when it comes to the graduates at university. As young people, we are often told, do this and you will achieve that. Do these steps and you will secure a better future. Go to school, study hard, pass your exams. Do not waste your time and invest in your family. Later this year, over 4,000 youths shall graduate from the different tertiary level institutions, and they will all be out of a job. Add that to the 5,500 students for the last 2 years. That gives you a total of roughly 10,000. Not to mention our nationals who are studying abroad and who will be returning with their qualifications to no jobs. In a Newsday article dated back to 2017, the UE Guild president at that time was concerned as students were graduating and there was no hope nor job space for or job opportunity for anyone. This was in 2017. To date, this is the same occurrence. More and more students are graduating with diplomas and degrees, and they seem to be nothing for us. 4 years, friends. 4 years has passed, and this government has done nothing. I know the Prime Minister said we must wean ourselves off the government's back, but I think this just goes to show how untouched and disenchanted he is from the same people who elected him. We need a thriving economic environment for both the public and private sector. I mean, it will be very unrealistic to expect the government to employ everyone, but what we are calling for is allowing for space for the private sector like SMEs, which the government does not effectively assist. In terms of GATE, why would any administration seek to dilute the effectiveness of GATE? There are several concerns ought to be ventilated. Nowadays, there are many attractive avenues for students to take, alternative routes to be qualified. I can tell you many of my friends who did not do CAPE as they did not see it fit. At UWI, there are several diplomas that in law, medicine, and even at UTT in engineering that act as a prerequisite for a degree. What happens to these students? Because the fact is, not everyone will get into school to pursue CAPE, and what happens to these students who must complete several certificates in order to be deemed qualified? In engineering, that is a route that is taken as you go from a technician to an engineer, but it takes steps. This government has money to pay rent for a minister's building. This government has money to make bad investments at NGC. This government has money to pay $118 million to ANV oil drilling, but our student population is suffering, and this government seems to do not care about them at all.
All right, well, thanks for that. And, well, Vandana, you know, this is social development being your shadow ministry, and, you know, I'd like to hear what you have to say about that.
My apologies. Yes. First of all, Kirk, I'll repeat. I think October 4th is a very important day for Trinidad and Tobago. And I believe that every citizen will be in front of their television on that day. Because arising out of this pandemic, the population they have faced a sense of shock, and they are still trying to get into the reality of what is occurring in terms of their daily livelihoods. And this forum being a youth forum, as you've just heard from two of my other colleagues in terms of employment opportunities and looking at the social impact of it, the lack of employment opportunities over the last 5 years or so, it has led to young persons facing early life challenges. And when I say early life challenges, I refer to the difficulties they are facing in terms of financial institutions, because you can't find a job if you are looking at the average 20-year-old, the age bracket of 20 to 30. The lack of a job opportunity during this time. And I'm saying lack of a job opportunity because I'm sure I face it on a daily basis, and all of my colleagues here, our MPs' inboxes are filled with resumes just for an opportunity to earn an income. And when I refer to the 20 to 30-year-old bracket, I speak in terms of these people lack opportunities. Further to that, they get older and they face further challenges with financial institutions in terms of building a credit rating. During that time, they find themselves having families, and it's very depressing to see our young mothers, young fathers having to depend on a food card, having to rush to the social development offices. You can't find the father of the child or so, and you're depending on public assistance. And it's a problem that was created. And this is a crucial budget because you are looking for ways to go back to the roots, to deal with the root of the problem, getting back into the community, investing into the community. We are too busy. The government is too busy. If you look at all of their policies, they are too busy on top and they are not busy on the ground. And it's a very sad situation. And I say sad because when you look at vulnerable communities, you see and you feel, you see the suffering and you feel the pain. And it can be so much better if you invest within the community. Do you know how good that would be to have young persons getting their own job opportunity? And I'll share something with you very quickly. When I became mayor of Chaguanas, in a matter of 6 months going into an election campaign, I recognized that this is the place I lived, this is the place I've worked, and this is the place I must grow. And those became my watchwords: live, work, grow. And with that being said, following being elected, I went on to keep that. Live, work, grow. Whereas persons, I try my best to find money to fund persons to start up a small business so they can live, work, grow within their communities. And if the government reaches a point where they invest deeper into the community in the midst of a pandemic, you will see growth within the community. Give these young persons a chance. We have state lands. Why are we not investing in our youth? We are saying it. And I speak when I say we sit in the parliament, yes, but the PNM is the government, and they should be investing within the communities. Give these youth a chance. They can invest in themselves by use of agriculture, manufacturing. I always had a vision for a rural technology park. Let them plant, let them manufacture, and let them sell. And in that way the community prospers. So why isn't the PNM investing in our young people? Why aren't they investing in the community? When you look at the social services system, you see, if you recall, the People's Partnership government went as far as the baby grant. That is how deep we went into attacking the root of the problem. Those things were eradicated under this government. And people would say we are preaching this, but these are the services which were helping in terms of the poverty reduction, which is now increasing. And under our government, you would have seen Rise Up. This was a program to help persons get out of challenging situations, and you see persons right deep down into challenging situations at this time, where you help persons to come out of situations. You help persons to budget their income and expenditure so they don't have to depend on the social services system. So we would like to see these types of investments in the midst of a pandemic because of the challenges persons are facing at this time. In addition, very quickly, my colleague who shadows education would tend to agree in terms of the social services. We have to invest. We have reached a point where this government must get off their seats. They have 22, and you have to wonder, where are they? If they are just on the seat and they don't walk into the communities. They are preaching education, but what are they doing? We have vulnerable families at this point in time. The social services, social support officers, school guidance counselors, they are facing challenges themselves. We have to invest in these officers. One officer for 700 students makes no sense. And investing in them will help us. Let them have a direct link out of this new budget coming here very soon, in a couple days. Let us have that direct link with the social services departments. Allow them the devices colleague Anita Haynes spoke about. Let them have that direct support. Just this week, I dealt with a student who could not write essay because of the fact that he could not see, and refused by social development the eyewear because they could not find his father. But I was glad to assist through the support of corporate. But what I'm saying is that they need to invest in these school guidance officers, in these social support officers, so that we can deal with the root of the problem and the vulnerable society. So with that being said, I will allow you to continue. I'm really sorry to take so much time, but it's just that, yes, I'm very passionate about these issues.
Great to hear. It's great to hear. I want to take a round robin question again, kind of sure, but this is a youth forum, and each of you are shadowing a particular ministry. So what I'd like you to do quickly is maybe explain to some of the viewers, what does, let's say, national security, or, well, education is obvious, but youth is obvious, tourism and the arts, social development. How is this relevant to young people, and then how does the budget fit into that? So
I'll pass over, because I just wanted to jump off on something both Vandana and Michelle spoke about, and coming out of this question of job opportunities, which we would have all faced, and we would have all lived through something like that, wondering, because the contract employment is so prevalent in our country, and what it means for people in our age bracket, literally in our age bracket. And but I am faced with a very unique situation right now, shadowing education, looking on at a minister of education tell persons that the teaching service, the occupation is closed off, shut off, done. But I am also faced with parents and schools that are telling me that there are no teachers for certain subjects. And so when Michelle said nobody lives here, she's very right, because they could never be living here. How are we in a country where there are vacancies and no vacancies at the same time? At the same time, no jobs. So, well, and then, we went into the Senate in 2017. 2017 was, I don't know if anybody recalls, it was the year of the turnaround for them, right? They turned around the economy allegedly. Yeah, well, that's what they said. They were game changers. I'll tell you, right, changed nothing, but they were game changers, turnaround. And at that time, going into the Senate, first response to the budget. I'm like going through the budget, all right, some of these things sound okay. But I know real people. And at that time, there were students who graduated as doctors. They were medical students, they had graduated, they were doctors, and they were unemployed. And I said in my first ever contribution to our budget, this is the first administration that created URP for doctors, because they were literally working at 10 days, and then they went home, weren't sure if they were going to get called again and come back. And that still exists today. And so you have beaten a population to the point where we cannot focus on being aspirational. When we talk about growing our communities, because we are literally fighting for basics. I want to discuss more things, but we have to spend half our time discussing potholes and drains, roads, because our connectivity is off. Because I cannot get from point A to point B in my constituency, in my community, where I live. If you try to pass, it is the Bocas, you cannot pass there. Yet still, we will sit down and you will hear hundreds of millions, billions of dollars to the Ministry of Works and Transport. To do what? What have they done with it? And then no wonder you asked us in the beginning why we got ourselves involved in politics. But no wonder people are fed up. Because if you are seeing that on a daily basis, and we have our parliamentary duties, and we have to respond in a certain way in Parliament. But that's why forums like these are important, and what we do within our communities are important too. Because people have to know. There are people with a responsibility, as Vandana rightfully pointed out, people who were elected with a responsibility to do certain things as an executive. We have roles as representatives, but when we're talking about shadow portfolios and whatnot, we are advocating on your behalf. And the only way we can do that is because we exist within our communities. We exist among the people we are advocating for, because we live the same type of lives. I mean, we are a generation of persons who, you could have masters, you could have PhD, you could have doctorates, you live in home by your parents because you cannot afford to buy a house in Trinidad and Tobago. Can't. If you on your regular, because you go to the bank and they'll be like, yeah, cool story, but nobody lives here, but nobody living there. And so when we approach the budget, and when we and when we get into the shadow portfolios, I mean, shadow education, I'm listening to teachers, I am listening to parents, I am listening to students, I am listening to the next generation of Trinidadians and Tobagonians, and they have been failed by this administration. I speak time and time again about data-driven policies, not because I like to hear it, not because I like to hear the words, but to do what Vandana said, you have to know what the problem is. To fix the problem, you have to know what the problem is, and the people who are in charge are unaware of what the problem is. Because if I could see an article today saying that they've given out 10,000 devices, and they have to give out 10,000 more. But last year, in April, we heard that there were 65,000 students without devices. And if you do that math, and you tell me half this year, that is not half, right? What is that math? And so you give, exactly, they should hire some math teachers for the cabinet. Because what we're facing now, is that any time they have a press conference, we get anecdotes and rhetoric. You come, you get up in the morning, you say, you know what? We give out some MiFi devices, 23 out of 72 schools. We have more than 72 schools in this country. You must know that. I mean, you are the minister. You must know that.
We built 100.
Yes, right. So just if it just by unless they're closing them down, and so this is what we're dealing with. You're trying to have a productive conversation, but the people who you're talking to cannot meet you halfway because they don't even know what they're talking about. And that's not politics. That is just pure fact. I cannot have a discussion with you about devices and connectivity if you are making up the numbers as you go along. How would we go forward? And I know Saddam would have faced similar things, because if education is one thing, but national security is I mean, the minister we have now, I am convinced, forgets he's the Minister of National Security from time and time. So Sarah?
It's how it deals with youth and
So let me start with what is a shadow portfolio? I mean, our system of governance is the Westminster system, and there's a cabinet, and we are not only the opposition, but we are actually the alternative government. And I think persons have to understand, when we say we are the alternative government, what that means. It means that when we shadow a minister, so I am shadow for Attorney General and also National Security, we really look at what their plans is for the year, because in the budget, that is where you come to the population and say, I want X amount of money because I want to do X, Y, and Z. Both Attorney General and Minister of National Security will come to the Parliament. We'll go through line items and we will hear what they have to say, what are their plans, what they had plans for last year they weren't able to do. When we go through that yellow book cook with the ruler and we go through the estimates and you ask, so you allocated, for example, $5 million to buy CCTV cameras, but you didn't spend any. What was the problem? Sometimes the answer we get, we'll put it in writing. Now, how could that be accountability? It can't. You're failing in your portfolio. They don't know, right? So that is why the Ministry of National Security has been in autopilot for quite some time, even when Minister Young was there, because he was more interested in the Ministry of Energy. And he was more interested in everybody else's ministry besides his own. And then you have Faisal Rawi, who is the Attorney General, and we're still struggling to find out which case we won as a government, since he's Attorney General, and he is the person who makes up half of the cabinet, because by law the cabinet must consist of two persons, the Prime Minister and the Attorney General, who advises the cabinet. And well, we see the kind of advice he gives to the cabinet. That is why we're currently facing a constitutional crisis. Many of you all, I'm not hearing this conversation, it is Faisal Rawi who is the person who changed the law for the new selection of a Commissioner of Police. And we are facing an unprecedented constitutional crisis because he changed the law. And this man will come to the Parliament, dress up as fancy as he can, pocket square, I have one too, pocket square or bow tie and tie, and then you come and you bring bad law. And when we complain incessantly, Faris, this thing is wrong, it is bad, they will tell us, we don't know what we're talking about, and this and that. And then when you go out and they try to roll this thing out, it's because they can't, because the law simply is not operational. For example, we passed the pepper spray law. How long was that? Almost at the beginning of the year we passed pepper spray law. Up until now, not a single person can carry pepper spray in this country legally. We have passed the Evidence Act, which is saying that they will allow cases to go faster in court. Well, right now, court is virtual. We're hardly having trials. We have the Shonuk trial that just completed. It took, 15 years for conclusion of that matter. And these are all of the issues because Faisal Rawi is in charge of the management of, for example, setting policy with respect to the criminal justice system, with respect to the civil courts. The judiciary is independent, but yet he is a line minister that will be there to help guide with respect to the laws that we pass. So when we pass the criminal division, it affects the judiciary to have different courts. And we have been asking, and Barry was very he was an activist on this in terms of sexual offenders. You have to have a new system for for example, persons who are victims of sexual offenses. You can't have them in the same courtroom with somebody who come with a traffic ticket or murderers or persons who... You have to treat these persons with dignity.
That's right.
Oh gosh, man. Treat them with some dignity in this country. Have specialized courts to help these victims. Have specialized judges so that these matters can go quickly in court. You know what it is like. I used to work at the DPP's office.
Yeah.
For a person who is a rape victim to have to recount that story in the magistrate court, because she has to do it there, then you have to give the lawyers instructions, so there's another time.
Yeah.
Then you have to go in the high court before a jury of 12 persons, 9 persons, and recount that story again.
Yeah.
You imagine the trauma you're putting that person through? And then they will get up and boast that we are the right choice. I mean, there are so many things to talk about with respect to criminal justice. There are so many things to talk about in national security. We have seen that they purchased some new vessels. I don't know how well they're working. I saw some issues at Stobbles recently with the bad weather we got. CCTV cameras in this country, they're not working. I heard Dr. Munilal recently said that it took 3 years to fix one camera. Correct. You have more police vehicles that are in a junkyard than police vehicles on the road. You can't give prison officers proper firearms to protect themselves. We see that there have been a lot of prison officers who were murdered. And there are so many issues to talk about. But what this government continues to care about is bacchanal. And the Wajang type behavior. We saw it with the member for Tobago West. Nobody lives here. And that is what they will continue to govern by. And it is simply that we need to restore dignity into the Parliament of Trinidad and Tobago. You cannot have a government continuing to railroad the democracy. You cannot have persons who are in charge of presiding over the House to continue to operate in a manner in which it does not foster democracy in that Parliament. We are there as a voice of not only 19 of us, but we are there as a voice of over 300,000 persons who place their confidence in us. And that is something that we have to, the population will acknowledge, and we will be there to speak out for them coming in this budget. But we will call out the government for their BS.
Right. Now, Saddam was talking about what a shadow minister is. You're following the programs and you are criticizing it. Now, one thing I know we've talked about, Barry, is that you are shadow for the youth ministry. Forgive me, I can't remember the long name for it. But there are no programs for youth. So tell me about that.
Thanks, Kirk. Essentially, that's very correct. Under each ministry or every department of government, there's something called a schedule. And that schedule will tell you what falls, what agencies, what state boards fall under that particular purview of this minister and this ministry. And that is gazetted from time to time once the president makes a proclamation and puts out the gazette and so on. It's shared. So that's a public document that can be found on the Parliament's website for anybody who's interested. And that goes for all ministries of government. So if you're interested in finding out where the Equal Opportunities Commission falls under, you go and you see under the different schedules, you will see the different boards, the different agencies, and so forth. Kirk, what do we expect and what would we like to see, particularly this being a youth forum coming out in the next budget for young people? I recall time and time again, having been a parliamentarian for the past 6 years, that this government will say that the UNC under Kamla Prasad-Bisesa and the People's Partnership, that we borrowed to save. And that we borrowed to save because that is how we put money in the Heritage and Stabilization Fund. I listened to Saddam a short while ago, and as we on the point of the Heritage and Stabilization Fund, I recall that going into the Parliament in 2015, there were certain things that we recommended. There were ideas and solutions. People said, well, don't just criticize. What is the UNC's plan? What if you were there, what were you going to do? And essentially in every sector, whether it be in finance, whether it be in social development, whether it be in the Office of the Attorney General Legal Affairs, we could have said specifically what were some of the plans and policies that we would have put in place that would have assisted for the years to come. And the Heritage and Civilization Fund is one of those very said things. They accuse us so many times of borrowing to save.
Yeah.
Today I want to ask members of government, how much money from the Heritage and Stabilization Fund have you saved?
That's right.
Because had it not been for the borrowing to save, according to you, under Kamla Prasad-Bissessar, you would not have been able to spend over $6 billion that you cannot account for under the guise of COVID. Where did the $6 billion come from? It came from the savings of a Kamla Prasad-Bissessar administration. So when they pander to the public, and they're very good at the propaganda, because Mbut is like, one year I recall he said he was a magician in the parliament, because he will come and he will say, well, they were running the exchequer account on fumes, and we only had money to run the country for 3 days. That narrative and that propaganda is what they sell very good to their core supporters, who then goes out there and parrot that, and they have the mantra of repeat, 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 and the more you repeat it, the more they believe people will believe it.
Even though
And
we
it's-
left the most amount of money.
And under Kamla Prasad-Bissessar administration, we left the most amount of foreign direct investment this country has ever seen.
And foreign exchange higher than ever.
Foreign exchange, HSF. But I want to get back to the Heritage and Stabilization Fund point, because of the fact. In 2015, they promised us they were going to bring legislation to separate the heritage from the stabilization. Never done. And had that been put in place, we might have had a different story today in terms of the wanton corruption and waste and mismanagement that we are seeing taking place with the Heritage Stabilization Fund. When we told them about pepper spray legislation since 2015, it took an Attorney General 6 years. And the death and murder and the outcry of the population of Andrea Barrett to bring pepper spray legislation that Kamla Prasad-Bissessar advocated for since 2015, when we went into opposition. When I stood and I told the Attorney General what this country needed was a sexual offenders registry to be made public, his very first response was, well, we will consider it, but it's not important. That at that time, that was 2015. Had we had this in place, then young Andrea Barrett may still have been with us, because the person who attacked her was a repeat offender. And the reason why we raise these things is not because of the fact that we want to say that we told you so, because Jolene John always tells us elections have consequences. And today we are seeing the consequences of that. But what we are saying is that while we criticize and we point out the different issues, we're also providing solutions. But it continues to fall on deaf ears. As Gabriel Faria told us a few days ago, this government don't listen.
Yeah.
And if they're not listening to the so-called 1%, then who the hell they're listening to? But with respect to this Ministry of Youth Development, there are 3 things that I would like to see coming out of this budget. One is government's plan in terms of their policy as to how they are going to start replenishing the Heritage and Stabilization Fund, and from when they intend on putting back money, the $5 billion that they can't account for under social development, back into the Heritage and Stabilization Fund. So I'm hoping that that will be a priority issue, because the Heritage and Stabilization Fund really provides for the rainy days of Trinidad and Tobago. And Anita spoke about it, the average man, woman and child in this country is not feeling the benefit of the Heritage and Stabilization Fund, yet we continue to see millions and billions of dollars expended. The second thing we would like to see coming out, especially with particular for youth, would be job creation. A Kamla Prasad-Bissessar administration could have told you we created 55,000 jobs, and we told you where those jobs were. We told you that it came from the hospitality sector when we opened up the Magdalena Hotel, when we gave incentives to the small businesses and these hotels and hoteliers and so on, and small businesses, bed and breakfast. That was for the tourism. Then we also diversified with respect to sport tourism by building these facilities across the country, where we are now attracting both international and regional teams and receiving foreign exchange through revenue. Then we had the idea of medical tourism. Those things are real tangible things that brought in revenue, and that was our plan and our impetus. So we want to know from this government, in this budget in particular, when things are so bad in this country, especially for young people, what opportunities are you going to provide, and what sectors are you targeting? When Kamla Prasad-Bissessar could tell you that I trained 2,500 nurses through the El Dorado Nursing Academy, we told them, we said, listen, computerize all the hospitals. You do not have to wait for the hospitals to be completed. in order to computerize the hospital records. That would have created 5,000 sustainable jobs in this country for young people. They never did it. So we want to know how many jobs you intend on creating and where you intend on creating these jobs. In the very first budget of this administration, they told us that they were going to create this undergraduate trainee program where 30 graduates would be absorbed into into the 28 ministries they had at that time. 2015 passed, 16 passed, 17 passed, 18 passed, 19 passed, 20 passed, and you know how many people were absorbed into that program? Zero, none, nilch, nada. And the last point that I would like to see addressed with respect to young people is having a conducive environment to encourage and foster small business development. Just recently, you and I had this discussion where I called for youth development and small business development to be a focus of this budget. Every year, the Minister of Trade and Industry comes and tells us we will do better with respect to increasing our capacity as it relates to the ease of doing business. Every year we have gotten progressively worse instead of better. No wonder Dr. Munila refers to her as a bubblegum minister, because in 5 years all she could come and tell the parliament was, I opened a bubblegum factory. Yeah. How does that impact young people when you do not have a conducive business environment for them to open business but also to operate business? Because opening the business is one thing, is operating the business when you don't have forex, when you don't have a conducive business environment that gives incentives to young people through these programs. Under this ministry, the only thing under the Ministry of Youth Development and National Service is the NEDCO loan program. They have established a fund of $300 million to facilitate small businesses during this COVID. I want to ask the ministers, how many small businesses have benefited from this $300 million facility? We have heard absolutely nothing in this pandemic as to how that is assisting young people with respect to small and even medium enterprise development. So those are the three things that I would really like to see as priority issues, separate and apart from some of the other issues my colleagues have identified in education, national security, etc. But these things will seriously impact the next generation of this country. And in a point that I made in the press release that I put out, we will, if this does not happen and this is not addressed in this budget, you're going to see mass migration. You're going to see the continuation of the brain drain syndrome, and you're going to see increased levels of crime. Separate and apart from what's happening with the Police Service Commission, the entire national security apparatus has collapsed. And these are the serious burning issues that will affect young people going into budget 2022 that I really am looking forward to, as I'm sure my other colleagues are, with respect to their portfolio areas in terms of having real tangible solutions. Anita told you, these are real people with real faces. Yeah. Their feet are on the ground. They see they face their children every single day with empty cupboards, empty pockets. And it's only when people in this country, it affects your pocket, then they wake up. And I recall in the parliament just a few weeks ago when we were doing another bill, when somebody said to Tobagonians, wake up, wake up. And now it's time for all of Trinidad and Tobago to wake up. Because if we don't wake up now, I cannot imagine what Trinidad and Tobago is going to look like for future generations to come.
Thanks for that. And now we want to try to wrap up for 7:30, and we're at 5 minutes left, really 6 minutes, and we have the three of you, so it doesn't leave much time, unfortunately. But why don't you at least quickly tell us, what you'd like to see in the budget and so forth.
I'll take half of a second, because my colleague would have touched with regards to tourism and what the partnership government would have instituted and all our policies. Now, what you find from this PNM government, they thieved our ideas, they put it in the roadmap of recovery. Please implement it. You take it, you put it there, you print it, implement. And with regards to the big announcement with regards to tourism that happened yesterday, yes, we welcome the employment, but again, this is another election ploy, because in my constituency, we know it all too well. I will ask Ms. Paula Gopi-Spoon to please operationalize the agro-processing plant. That will create jobs for my constituents. And also, I will ask Shampa, please open the Murga Sporting Facility. That alone, maintenance contracts, a facility manager, it will give opportunities.
Nobody lives there.
All right, I'll pass it back to my colleague.
Kirk, just quickly, because I would have mentioned earlier some of the things I would like to see. In addition to what my colleagues have said in closing, what I would say is that we don't need distraction. We don't need changes in narrative every hour, every 2 hours, based on how you see it fit to touch the minds of citizens. We need results. Young people of this country, they want to see results. They don't want to message Anita Haynes, Saddam Hussein, Barry, all of us to say, hey, how can you help me with a job? Because I know it's because of who you know. Because they are just desperate. We don't want to see that anymore. We want to see the root of the problem being dealt with. We are approaching another budget, and persons from 2020, they have not been paid social support, income support grants. Mid-year review, the government came, and as you saw what happened in that standing finance committee, what they did to us at the end of it, and then they switched the narrative, as they are accustomed doing, to say that we were unruly, but really and truly they were running from answering the questions. And to
people who don't remember, they cut you all off from answering the question.
of course, and we are approaching a new financial year, and we are yet to see yet to see how many persons were screened for income support, how many persons were paid, and we are approaching a new financial year. So it's a situation where the citizens are frustrated, they are disappointed. So more expenditure is coming to us, but the resolution of issues, the comfort of citizens, it remains unanswered. And they are still facing the same situation as they were facing over the last year since the start of this pandemic. So, very quickly, I'll just say to our youth, keep strong, and of course, continue to work existing systems, and break barriers. We are here as young ones within the system to support you and to fight for you. So thank you very much for having us, MP, and thank you very much, host.
Thank you. And the youth chairman, just quickly, wrap up.
Okay, one thing that we need to look at is this new Ministry of Digitization, but clearly we do not have the time right now. So in closing, I would just like to say, the UNC, we are not only about, complaining, we are here to give solutions. We suggest that this government hold consultational meetings with the people of Trinidad and Tobago. Be compassionate because we are in a pandemic. Diversify the economy. Renewable energy sector, agriculture and tourism are some of the ways that we can invest and make money. And one important thing is to address climate change. Before I go, youths, young people, people of Trinidad and Tobago, we the UNC remain committed to you. We remain committed to fighting for you and on your behalf. Young people, do not give up. We know it is hard and difficult out there, but keep pushing and keep going, and eventually things will fall into place.
Before we close, I would like to raise one thing. So yesterday, knowing that I'm coming here on this youth forum, I would have called our youth council, our newly elected council. And one of the things that they mentioned is mental health issues. They're getting a lot of calls among the youth population, 18 to 26. Persons are having issues coping with what is going on, unemployment, frustration, and I think the ministry that you shadow, Honorable MP, needs to pick up that issue.
I bet you even a lot of suicidal.
May I add, the youth we have a hotline set up for mental awareness and mental health, so we could probably post the number on the UNC main page, and persons who may suffer from depression or whatever, they could reach out to our people with the message, "Are you listening?" via WhatsApp, and they will get in contact with you directly.
Well, I know we could go on and on, but we have to stop. It's been really great, and I hope we can do this again in future. And this has been the voice of youth with the UNC. We've had MP Saddam Hussein, MP Anita Haynes, MP Barry Padarat, Kavish Sirial from the youth arm, MP Michelle Benjamin, MP Vandana Mohit. Thank you very, very much for everything. It was great. This was our virtual budget consultation. Thank you, our viewers, and we hope you enjoyed this. Have a great evening, and we have Victor Roberts up next. Is that correct? Happy Republic Day. Happy Republic Day.